here we have Rakeem Cunningham,
Hello.
and Angelino from beginning to now, and then also have Clifford Prince King, who originally from Tucson and now Los Angeles, and you'll be seeing images of the installation they created. They're kind of side by side, kind of like really good independent players, like children parallel playing kind of, I thought, like the idea of like, what's he making over there? What am I making over there? And I kind of like how the pairings go from beginning to end, how we start with, your dad's in the same frame, sharing a frame, and then the other couple pairings down the way to kind of bring you to the back, sort of bring you to this, like a ceremonial chamber at the end. On Rakeem's part, the shrine is very, there's a lot of celebration in it. It's very, it can be loud, it can be boisterous, it has humor in it. And Clifford's has kind of three main stark pillars of human people he chose, and then around that kind of sort of builds these other parts of humanity. That there's even part of Rakeem's body, and there's the legs upside down, but then we have sort of the inside the tapestry, all of this tragedy of whether it's Philando Castillo or Breonna Taylor or George Floyd, and there's that edge of the celebration and not a celebration. And just the way Rakeem's piece has the bit of the red lacquer coming out of the bottom. So I don't know. It's hard to sometimes think about these things because like even just last night with Jacob Blake in Wisconsin. So how do you guys reconcile sometimes working while all this is going on?
Do you want to go first?
You can go first.
Okay. Well, thank you for having us. We're excited to be there. And that's a good first question. I think that making work during this time is a few different things. I think for me, it's very like normal because I make work all the time anyway. And like you want to create, and part of that is just reacting to kind of what's going on. I also feel like during times like these, there's this like pressure almost that Black artists get where it's like when we are talking about police brutality and we're protesting and things like that, where people look at Black artists and go, okay, well, like, what's the move? And it's like, well, we can choose to react to it or not. And part of why the installation is so celebratory is because I think it's important to actually talk about like the fullness of what a Black life is, and not just talk about like the like oppression of like Black people and talk about like death. I think it's also important to have those things intermixed or shown with things that are celebratory or things that like I like or grew up with, or things that Clifford liked and grew up with, or things that like Clifford reacts to now, or things that I react to now. And when you juxtaposition that next to like a piece that is more like loud and colorful, like how do you reconcile those two things kind of living in the same space? Because as Black people, and especially as Black queer people, like we often have to live in a space like that too. So I guess to answer the question in a more simple way, like for me, making work is just something that I always do. And, there might be like pieces that are specifically kind of geared towards that. But I think that it's, if anything, I'm a bit more aware of like what other people that aren't Black artists are like doing during this time. Because I feel like for a lot of us, it's like, okay, like, and as unfortunate as it is, like we're killed so often. Like when are we not making work in a time where Black people are not killed,
Yeah, just even thinking about reading about yesterday, and then like they're explaining, like reading the sort of the lead up to what happened. It just feels like I can't imagine what it's like to feel, because the way the escalation seems to happen in these situations where it goes, I don't know, it sucks. Anyway,
to like, I think me and Rakeem talked about this as we were installing, and one of the reasons why I really love Rakeem's work is that it is Blackness but also like the work isn't just about oppression or sadness. It is celebratory, and there's, you know, his hobbies and love for anime and like all these other things that people like don't really, like, some people don't understand that there are other things that Black artists can bring to the table other than talks of their oppression and sadness. And I mean, that can be said on any sort of art form, acting, you know, like dark-skinned Black women can play a role that's not a slave and do a great job, you know, like just like making this, the installation that we just did was kind of a combination of celebrating Black life, but also, you know, we can't avoid what we're going through at this moment. So just bringing those faces to the gallery, which is also something that should be done, like regardless, is like having those faces and names in all places. You know, galleries are very exclusive and not, you know, a lot of friends that I know aren't very comfortable in gallery spaces that are Black.
Same.
So I think it's nice to have those faces in a gallery space to kind of celebrate their life, and also to just, you know, like it's there, and so you can't really ignore it. And then with the collages that I wheat pasted, you know, there's some of my work in there, Rakeem's work, just to kind of like, it's in everyone's work, whether it's about survival or our oppression or not. It's just a matter of, you know, there's levels to it.
Yeah. And those three main images, there's the one with a man with a flower in his mouth, and then there's two other more torso. How did you feel about? Was there specificity on how you chose those? Or was it feeling?
I chose those because they were the best photos that I had that could Xerox well.
Okay.
Contrast is a big part of Xeroxing, and you know, I think the best part about this installation was just kind of going in to solely have fun. There wasn't like a exact sort of idea that I had, but then just to like be there a few days and like watch the idea grow was like the best part. And I think that's also a part of why the installation is so important, because, you know, we make art as Black people and we're expected to have this huge list of how upset and sad and how we're oppressed, but like sometimes you just want to have fun and like make work and, you know, throw a flower here, a touch of pink there, and like talk about something completely like different. But in the time we're in now, I think it's a good time to be more vocal about those things and just yeah.
And Rakeem, the photographs you chose, for the most part, they're not all that recent. You chose the pieces that were a little bit on the older side. Can you talk a little bit about why you chose those?
Yeah. So I chose older pieces because I thought that, like, so part of the collage and the installation, when I was thinking about it, was about like the full, like, and I mentioned it before about like the fullness of what a Black life is and what that looks like. So I thought that for myself, it would be interesting to get photographic work that talked about the subject matter that we're in right now, and like the time that we're in right now, but also might be like a bridge in between the installation and like the idea of the show. So I thought that they were works that kind of had like these like colorful aspects to it, but like darker elements. So like a lot of the photographs, like with the red, like gel paper, for example, like things like that, where it's like obscuring the face and like kind of the color of blood and things like that. And then that then kind of matches like the, you know, the little like blood stain that's on the floor. But I also thought it was important to like pay homage to like the Black child inside of myself that was making that work at that time and didn't feel validated. So like, you know, I made that work when I was I'm 28 now, and I think I was like 20, like 22 maybe when I made that stuff. And during that time, I didn't really have the confidence in myself as an artist and a person that I do now. So it's kind of talking about like when you go back and you know, like soothe and like have conversations with like your inner child, like what that looks like. And so picking those photographs was a way of kind of reconciling like my art practice now and work that I've made before, and then how those things kind of come together in like this, you know, like gumbo of Black artwork. So yeah.
I'm gonna move backwards slightly in a way. So like, you know, you're Clifford, you're mainly a photographer, and Rakeem, you do, you know, multimedia also stuff, but photography is still like kind of a little bit of your original source, Rakeem.
Mm-hmm.
So like it's strange that it's a medium that's still like, it's, you know, we have these digital things, but it's a 3-century-old like piece of technology, and it still gets kind of debated about where it fits in the arts quote, because it's, you know, as a photographer, there's always that start of it, you know, maybe not a photography class, but it starts out as some kind of recreational medium.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm curious about where in your lives that you guys, it sort of hit you that this was a medium that like you wanted to explore more deeply, or it affected you in some kind of deep way that inspired you to move on. So, and maybe around that, maybe talk about sort of your background to that sort of also influenced why you would end up being interested in photography. Either one of you can go.
I took a film class in high school, and I'm from Arizona, obviously, so you don't really go outside until like 8 p.m. during the summer. So I would literally watch like 3 movies a day, or like 2 a day. But then, you know, I would just watch really obscure movies like Criterion Channel, or just like Ingmar Bergman and stuff like that, which relies a lot on like visuals, you know, not so much a script, but like face and like action and subtlety. So I just got really involved in movies. I made some movies in high school that aren't very good, but just really visually attracted to just telling stories without dialogue in a way.
So you do think of because they look like pieces of a narrative, and I was wondering if because you said, you know, sort of like, so you think of them kind of that way also.
Right. Yeah. You know, I think when I take photos, it's kind of nice to try to convey that something happened before and then something's going to happen after. Just, you know, you capture that moment, but is this person, you know, like there's so many things you can ask yourself about this person in the image. But yeah, it mostly cinematography, and then, you know, I just didn't really pursue cinema or filmmaking because it's expensive, and you have to rely on a team to like edit and do all this stuff, and I'm like, I don't want to do that. So
Yeah,
film camera was and then it gradually
so doing like, yeah, if you want, yeah, having it stay filmmaking and be small and personal is almost, it's a Herculean like feat to be able to do all the jobs yourself, kind of sometimes, and keep things small, or also scope. So,
right, it's almost like it's, you know, you're the top of the filter, and when you have a team, it just goes all the way through to the bottom, and then you have this like watered down version of what you want to do. So in high school and like,
yeah,
but I'm sure there's like,
I went to film school, so I made those bad films also. So I know.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, well, I think your work is super cinematic, Clifford, and like that's such a like good way of saying it. And I also think that it's very intimate, like with a lot of the photography. So it's almost kind of like having such a big team would feel like at odds almost with like with what the work is, because it's such like so intimate. It's funny thinking about like if you're doing like looking at some of your photos and there's like a team of like 30 people like
who's that guy in the corner with the light on me? Like, no, that wouldn't really work.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, for me, mine's kind of the opposite in that I didn't really have any arts background until I was around like 16, 17, and my mom just randomly asked me to take photos of my sister in the back, like in the backyard, so she could put them in frames. And I picked up the camera that we got from like Sam's Club for like $25, and you can hold like 6 pictures without a memory card in it. But it felt right. I don't know if that makes sense. Like, it just felt like I was supposed to have that in my hands or whatever. And right after that, I just became obsessed. And so that Christmas, I asked for a DSLR camera that I luckily got. And I would just like go to the park and create like all these images like with myself, because I didn't have friends at the time. So like I would just get cardboard boxes and like photograph myself, because my sister would get tired of me asking to like have her stand in like bushes with like bees.
What were the cardboard boxes for? Props already? Huh?
Tripod. Because at that time I didn't really have a job. So like what I would have to do is get like boxes from like grocery stores and then tape them together. And then I would have to like walk 2 to 3 blocks with like this giant like cardboard thing. But it gave me this sense of like purpose and fulfillment. And I think since then, why I gravitated towards photography and like why I do it have changed. I think that like when I was younger and like at UCLA, it was a lot about like making work that made me feel like I was attractive, because I wasn't told that I was. And then I think as I got older, it became way less about like how I felt about, or like that's still degree, but it's not for other people anymore. Like I think I was doing the work before to like prove to myself that like I could make work of a certain level, or that like people would like me or something like that. But now it's a lot more depth to it. So it definitely deals a lot with like fantasy elements, and part of why it's so like loud and colorful, it's because how Clifford's is like these intimate moments with people. I almost like to like dress up so that I get to be like over the top and like as extravagant as I like want to be. And like if I was making, and like if I photograph myself and like am making this set, like what does that look like when I'm making this set for myself? And I kind of like to think of them as like spaces that are somewhat like oppression free. And like if like Black people and the people that I'm photographing in these spaces were able to like make their own sets that talk about themselves, or like that reminisce painting and other things, like how does that look? So that's kind of like what it is now.
Yeah, because your work seems like, it is funny that the more I think about the two of your photography practices, the more like seems like they're like, it's almost like a vertical difference. Like you're shooting for the sky. You're like I'm just gonna head to space. And Clifford, you're like, it's almost like you're trying to find firmer and firmer into the ground that we're in. So it's, and so what do you think about, like, cause Rakeem, sometimes when I've thought a little bit about your, closing, okay, sorry, one sec. There was, I was thinking of today when I was like writing up some notes for it, I was imagining you in your, cause I think about you in your room creating these sets, and it reminded me slightly of even like Where the Wild Things Are, where, like the kid has props and this whole world, and you go to the fantasy world for a while and you come back, and it's almost the most touching part is that bit where you're like, the things that stood in for the crown and the scepters and the things, like all that stuff is like the imagination of that, like almost like it gives me the chills, because it's what we got, it's like, it's what we have, like the imagination is there. And it's a little bit of, obviously there's a little bit of comedy in you being a superhero in your room, but it's also like immensely touching also. So it's very powerful.
I mean, and it's also like part of it is too, like, and this goes into, like the anime characters and stuff like that. Like oftentimes, like when we talk about Black people in art, or like Black people in the news, it's in relation to police brutality, like how we're being oppressed, like if we're killed. And so I think that it's also good to start like making images, or I want to make images that display us as like the heroes and protagonists, like of our own stories, and like the protagonists of like these collages that we're making. And like, like we can wear capes and like, I don't know, do whatever the fuck superheroes do. But also to like allow us the ability to like be a person too, and not like, because I think sometimes it's tricky because I think in a lot of like Black women specifically, I think get this, where you're the whole like strong Black woman stereotype. Like, I don't want to make work that is like, oh, Black people are, you know, like we're inhuman and we're like these super beings. Like, that's not it. It's more like we have the ability to be that. So if we choose, you know, and like, that's kind of what I want to communicate.
Yeah. Well, because sometimes it does seem like you are, a superhero with the cape and things like that. But other times there's definitely is the more, like almost dowdy, like odd poses that are held. It's almost like Baroque Renaissance paintings where like the angels in the sky, like in these almost weirdly strange poses that no one would go to. There's like there's the performer who was in Blood of the Poet, the Cocteau film, Beryl Benga. And he was known, he was like a Senegalese cabaret performer in France. And he would be photographed and he was like, a lot of people made sculpture of him, but he was always holding these very interesting poses, and they were just very unnatural, but they were so fascinating.
That part of the poses is actually funny because it comes from a few different places, but mostly the poses come from like being in church when I was younger and like seeing people get really excited and like what we call like people getting the Holy Ghost, and they're just like, you know, like this, and they're like jumping around, and it's very like celebratory, and it's like when you like lose yourself in this feeling of like gratitude or like thankfulness or like whatever, like you lose yourself and you stop caring so much about like how you appear to other people. And I always found that like very fascinating, like when people in church like speak in tongues, you know, and it's like the ability for people to do that without like feeling embarrassed or anything, like was something that always fascinated me. So a lot of the poses like come from that, but also too, like you were saying too, it's partially like replacing like the Renaissance figure because it wasn't like me or Clifford that people were painting back then, you know, like, and so like I want to do that like in a photographic way to a degree.
Yeah. But you say when you lose yourself, do you feel like, do you know that that's when you can tell when you've lost, when you've gone to this other place, kind of when you're photographed, do you know that then that's where something good's going to happen? Do you feel it, or from experience, you know it, or you're really like or is more the experience important of being in the, like, just as much as the documentation of what you're shooting, you're being the place you find yourself in is really important?
Yeah, I think it's more of that, like the experience itself, because sometimes it's like very humbling where like I get into the moment and then it's like you
are doing Twister there sometimes.
Yeah, I mean, you like look at the photos and you're like, oh, this is not like what I thought it would be. And, you know, I've done it enough to where like I can understand the angles of my body and like what things might look a certain way, but you have ideas and they always don't come out the way that you like them to. So I try to surrender myself to the process. So typically what that means is like I go into the studio, I lock the door, I made sure that my studio has like privacy glass on it so that people can't like interrupt. Like, I don't know if I can say this, but I'll drink and smoke a little bit. And then I just kind of like go in there and like lose myself like in the process. And it's very much about like surrendering yourself to the art and the process of art making. And so whatever happens kind of in that moment happens. And it's funny because I almost like don't remember a lot of the shoots that I do. Like I can't even tell you like how the photo shoot itself went, nor like how long they did. I just remember like starting it and then when I get tired and then finish it. And so the in-between is very much like this blur because it is very like emotional and stressful. And like, I cry sometimes, like sometimes I'll dance listening to music. Other times I'm listening to podcasts. So it really kind of depends on like what mood I'm in and like where I'm at in life at that particular moment.
So where, you know, you're in a, like, even though you're in a private room, your pieces come off as theatrical and public. And then Clifford, your pieces are, you know, they feel very private. You know, and sometimes, but they don't feel totally like voyeuristic. They do feel like you're like the audience, like a viewer is supposed to be seeing this. It's important to look at, but it feels like they feel very domestic also. on the settings.
Like the root of my shoots are just they're kind of just as whatever is happening is already happening. Like, I mean, I've photographed people after like a long night out, or like after sex, or just like it like midway between like smoking a joint or something. So it's never really like, I mean, more so today, it's a little more intentional, but you know, a lot of the work that I make is kind of like stopping myself in my tracks as I'm living a moment, and I'm like, wait, I should take a picture of this, and then it's already like, you know, there.
Well, if I can't help but when I look at your compositions are they're really amazing. I mean, not to mention your lighting and all this. There's so many elements to yours that they're really like they're seductive and they're coy and they're confident, but you can't help but wonder, like, is this the moment that just like, bam, I grabbed that and the camera clicks, or do you feel like this is my composition kind of, and this is a little, let me sort of like, or do you still compose the elements in that are, because I see you're taking the things that are there, but then do you choreograph your models somewhat a little bit, or?
It depends. I mean, sometimes there's people that are just literally like rolling out of my bed, or vice versa, or like, I mean, that was like 2 years.
Vice versa.
Yeah. Because they do seem like such strong moments of a story that it's feel like you can't tell if like, once again, like Rakeem said earlier, is there 30 people behind making this scene look? But no, it's, you know, I mean, obviously it's all you, but I didn't know if it was, if you.
Right. I mean, there's this photo that I took. It's called Our Last Blunt Together, and it's me like holding like the joint of this, you know, it was like the end of a blunt, and I like was holding it up to his lips like while laying down. I was like, this looks really nice, because like, you know, like sometimes the time of day, like the light is in your room and it's like, ooh. So then my camera was like right next to me in bed, and I just like, and then that was it. But I mean, sometimes that happens, and sometimes it's like, wait, can you like do that again, or like, you know, things like that. I think just like being free in a space and then saying stop, rewind, or like go over there and do that, versus like, you know what I mean? Just like little things. But I prefer just to like have my camera with me all the time, just in case. So it's not like I never like, I'm going to go shoot today, unless it's like something like super intentional, or with people that are paying me. Your pieces, because of there's such a calm, but almost like it's sometimes there's a sadness in your pieces too, and the way they're feel like so specifically posed. They almost remind me of painting also. They remind me sometimes of a little bit like of a religious painting, of sort of like, you know, the saints in their moments of contemplation. Contemplation is definitely something that touches upon, I feel like, when you're looking at your work, your subjects are definitely in thought. It's definitely like a stillness of like emotion, which is, I mean, yeah, I feel like a lot of portraits can be sad because, you know, like it's all in the eyes really, and you don't know what someone did that whole day or whole week before sitting in front of your camera. So it's kind of, and I think the cool part about that is that when someone sees that photo of themselves, like later on, it kind of brings them back to how they were during that time. So I think that's like the best part about portraiture, is kind of like marking that time. And
so even beyond another viewer, you feel like you're like what means a lot to you is the subject's experience of that moment again, that you sort of capture with the camera.
Well, I just think it's art, but also it's just like something that everyone should be able to have, like that moment where you look back and see an old picture of yourself and you like automatically jump into that time in your life where you might have been heartbroken, or like, you know, you had some crazy night the night before, or you know, you had a diagnosis a week before, and now you're sitting in front of this camera and you look so much different now, you're happier now, or you're the same. I think it's nice to just have that art of, you know, it's art, but it's also just like, if it wasn't, you should still have it. I don't know.
It's life.
But
Yeah.
And when I was preparing a little bit for this, there's something interesting that I read that Clifford said that I was curious a little bit more what you meant. But you said that your portraits were a nod to the beyond. And I got sort of really super curious as to a little bit more of what you meant. I mean, maybe you meant, maybe it's just one part of them, or maybe it's not a big explanation, but I was just curious what that meant.
Ooh. Well, I think in a lot of my work, I use like iconography. Like there's a picture of Martin Luther King, Robert Rayford, who was like 16, one of the first HIV positive people in the US. Just like, I know we make work now, but it's also just kind of like, you know, it's traces of the past, and hopefully what we're doing now is going to be what we're doing. You know what I mean? Like
it's
legacy. Yeah.
It's a legacy. It's what's handed down also. I mean, cause there's that photo, in that photograph you have where it's not in the exhibition, but I've seen it online of yours. It's really great. Martin Luther King is in the background, and then on the floor are a few books, and one of them is like Leonard Freed's. I'm not sure if it's your book or somebody else's.
Oh yeah,
Leonard Freed's like
Black and White America.
Black and White America,
Right.
And so and it made me start to think about you know, obviously, like that was it's an amazing piece of documentation, but it also made me think a little bit about, you know, conversation I've heard Rakeem have about sort of the power of representation, and that's definitely something. I mean, it almost seems like might be like a calling almost of part of what you guys do is to reclaim representation of Black America. What do you?
I think what me and Rakeem do, we bring, you know, the past, you know, MLK, whatever civil rights leaders that we admire, but then we also add a queer aspect to it to include ourselves in that history.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, there's the one with MLK and like the two boys like kissing or whatever under him. Everyone knows Martin Luther King's face, but then when you add two queer boys kissing under it, it like gives it a inclusion of queer space, and you know, it creates a different type of narrative and dialogue. Yeah.
Sure. Like, I mean, even doing that, I think challenges what people think about when they think about Martin Luther King anyway, because I think like it's very like, I think when people think about Martin Luther King, like, you know, he was straight, he had a wife, like he had like the nuclear family type of thing. And like queerness isn't something that I feel like is brought up a lot when we talk about like civil rights and the Black civil rights movement, like for example, like, you know, we talk about like the Montgomery boy boycott and all this, but like we don't talk about like specifically how queer Black people, or at least like I think in like mainstream media, like how queer Black people are affected in that way. So I think doing, you know, and having iconography like that is really strong, and it forces you to think about things in that way. And in terms of reclaiming things, I think that that's part of it. I also think part of it's navigating what that means, because part of me like doesn't want to reclaim certain things, like if that makes sense. Like I'm more interested in like building like my own kind of like history and my own kind of like art canon, and not necessarily like tie what I'm doing to like, it's influenced by that for sure, but rather I don't want to give it importance because it's like tied to this other thing that I feel I have to be attached to. So like when, you know, like when you're doing the sets and doing the collages and whatnot, like, yeah, it's definitely referencing and like poking fun at and sometimes like literally remaking art history, but I don't think that's what gives it the importance per se, or like, you know, it's more of like the fact that it's something that like we did, and like that I made, and it's like an idea that comes from me more so than like I'm going to try to insert myself in these spaces that already exist. But at the same time, like, I'm not going to act like I don't do that because, you know, like, we're in galleries and, you know, like, I'm not fully just showing every single thing I make in like Black-owned galleries. So I think that there's this, like, I forgot where I heard it, but like, art is where contradiction or like can exist kind of at the same time. And I think for me personally, and like working with Clifford has made me think about this a lot, about like what gives your work value, like what institutions gives your work value, and or rather, does the institution give the work value, or does it just add on to the value that like you're already giving it? So like the example that we talked about was when like the whole Vogue challenge was happening, and Clifford was like, well, you know, like, I don't get why so many people are like hopping on this or whatever, because it's like Vogue has never been there for Black people, you know, like Tyler Mitchell was like the first Black person to shoot a Vogue cover, which is fucking ridiculous. And it's like, so, and like the Grammys, for example, too, like the Grammys always reward and like, you know, my God. The Grammys always shit on.
This isn't broadcast. This is Zoom.
The Grammys always like, you know, like under award Black artists for what they're doing. And like, so how do we make work and make work that's important and make work that we care about without it having to exist in the art world equivalent of like the Grammys, you know? Like, how do we do that in a way that gives our work importance? And that's something that I'm really trying to think about and see how that actually looks and you know, exists in a real space.
Are there times when does the frustration build around thinking about that? Thinking about how the space isn't really there for you, or when a little space is made, it's supposed to be enough.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's frustrating because it's like, it's just stuff that I don't think like white artists have to think about, you know? And it's frustrating because I think it's like this extra layer that like Clifford and I have, and like other Black artists like have to think about, or sometimes they have like put on you. But at the same time, it's, I think I'm frustrated with myself too, because it's like, why do I get that so much value? So I think it's both. Like it's frustrating in a lot of ways. Like I think it's frustrating because like the fact that like it's something that like me and Clifford will be asked, but like other artists won't be asked. But it's also important to recognize like the history of why that is. And then it's frustrating because you have to then reconcile all the stuff you've been taught, you know? Yeah. So it's a lot and it's layered. And so like Clifford was saying, like there's just a lot to it. And I don't think any of this stuff is just like a cut and dry answer. It's multitudes inside of it.
Cool.
Does that make sense? Like, I don't know if I was like...
No. Yeah. And one part of it was like, one part of it actually was almost going to follow up with a little bit of what you said, in the sense that, one part in there, I wasn't quite sure what you meant. So I'll maybe interject and you can tell me if this is what you're talking about. Is it almost sounded like you were also frustrated with the fact that you have that being frustrated with the system gives it power over you, you know, that, and it seems like, when you don't feel like you're being understood or being listened to or whatever, that's sort of some of the most like internally combustible, frustrating part in the world. Like all humans just are dying to be, you know, whether it's like, you're not listening to me, mom, or the world, or the institutions that really are gatekeepers for all this stuff. So.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's like, yes, for the short answer is yes. And it's just, but it's kind of like, I get upset because like you said, like you get upset that you're upset about it, but it's like, I think part of it too is, and what I'm reconciling is allowing yourself the ability to like have that conversation with yourself. So instead of me saying like, okay, Rakeem, like, fuck you for not like always feeling like this and feeling like I did the Vogue challenge, you know? So like, I was like, oh shit, like, wait, maybe this is something I need to think about. So it's me thinking like, okay, like being frustrated at the fact that I'm not, I don't know, that it feels like you're like participating in this system that like doesn't care about you. And then you like guilt yourself. I don't know. It's a lot. And I'm still kind of like figuring it out. Like the art world is really weird in that way, but it's a lot of like, over analyzing, I think, that I'm doing, but I don't know. Clifford, what do you think? I'm curious.
About the Vogue challenge, or just like
in general, like is that something that you struggle with? Because I think like me talking to you made me think about it like a lot more, and I really respected your opinion on it, and I think that you're right. So like, how did you get there, and like, do you still struggle with that?
Struggle with just like trying to figure out where I get validation, or like I've kind of let go of all that. I feel like it just takes some time to just, you know, understand that you would be doing what you're doing whether or not these places existed to like show. Like I never really thought about showing work in galleries or anything. It's kind of just something that kind of like came to be. Mm-hmm. But like I feel like if I didn't discover that world, I would still be taking the pictures I would be taking. Mm-hmm. Maybe just a little less thoughtful, and like no fashion or anything, but just like, you know, I just think there's like an acceptance to, you know, you're really doing what you're doing for yourself versus like, I mean, there's other ways to look at it too. There's probably better answers for people who are like, you know, who see like what they do as like work and like what they do as like a source of income, but I mean, I worked at a grocery store up until like 2 months ago. So like, this is all very like, I'd probably still be working there if there wasn't a pandemic. But I just think like photo is just like such a part of me that I don't think I need anyone to like tell me that it's good or like that it's not, that it should be in this show or that show. It's like, it's gonna be alive whether it's good or you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Like,
do you feel like, that makes you sound, that sort of puts you in slightly, like if you think of, if you know, in slightly way what we're talking about right now is in power dynamics, in a way, a little bit of way Rakeem framed things a little bit. Does that actually also protect you a little bit from that sort of like, okay, I'm going to try to show it at a gallery, I'm going to try to show it here, if you're in your own world by your own rules, it kind of takes away a little bit of the pressure of sort of like, well, did anything sell at that show? Or it's the like, you know, how's this going to go?
I mean, there's always that pressure when you're like putting your own money into things, for sure. Like if you're like paying for frames or, you know, whatever it could be, if you're putting anything financially into something, you know, you'd want a good result. But as far as like, you know, I think gallery shows to me are generally just like come see the work. Mm-hmm. in real life. Like you see this picture that is like the most exciting thing for me at shows is seeing the work like larger. Like that's the most gratifying part, is seeing the work blown up and like framed. And then after that I can just walk away and be like, all right, that was cool. Like I hope something sell to like, you know, I don't know, buy whatever or like sustain my living if I'm not working somewhere else. Yeah. But that's like the best part.
And so think that, and then so you know, looking at the future then also for you, do you feel like, do you feel like the photography you're doing is just a continuation of kind of who you are and where you're at? Or do you feel like you do have like thoughts in mind of like, I want to move in this direction, or I want to do a series of this, or?
I think it's just kind of like where I'm at in life. I think, you know, I'm like an uncle now to like 2 babies. So I can imagine myself like when they're older, like just taking their picture, and that can become some sort of series.
Yeah.
But and there are some ideas that I have that are a little more like intentional that I could see myself pursuing with like a budget or something. But I think just like as I like age and like experience new places, you know, I'd love to go to Brazil for like 3 months and just see what happens, like image making wise. Yeah, just like going with it. I don't like to get too wrapped up in like what I can make in the future. And like, yeah. I mean, there's a time and place for that too, but you know.
And Rakeem is, so, I mean, for you right now, the way your practice mostly would be Brazil would be created in your bedroom. So how do you look at, like, how do you see do you envision how you want your work to grow or change, or you still, is it really, you know, I'm curious.
Yeah. I think like, also, I apologize for the light coming down. I don't have a light in where I'm at, and so it's.
Are you covering your speaker?
Oh, is this better?
For a little bit, you were a little bit quieter.
Oh, that's better.
I'm sorry about that.
Harass you.
Yeah, I think. Yeah, I definitely think about it and how it will like mature and grow in the future. And there are definitely things that I'm like working towards, or like series or ideas that like I have and things. And I think a lot of it just is what Clifford said, like budget is a lot of it, you know, like there are projects that I would like to do, but like I'm poor. So, you know, like when I get like more money, there are things I would like to do. But yeah, I'm kind of with Clifford in the same like boat when it comes to creating work. Like I try not to think so much about like, okay, well I did this now, so I have to do this, or like I made 10 collages, so I have to do this photograph, or like this work has to evolve in this kind of way. Like I think it'll naturally kind of do that as you get older and you get more life experience. And I think what I found too, oddly, is the older I get, like even though I make a ton of work now, I make way less work than I did when I was younger, because it was, I think back then the purpose was like, you are making this to prove something to someone, whereas now it's like you're making it when you feel you have something to say. And I think when you keep making work when you have something to say, or when you just feel that need to, your work will progress in and of itself. Like, you know, like Clifford was saying, you see something and you're like, oh, I want to photograph that. Or I'm at Home Depot and see a material that I want to get. Or like, I don't know, sometimes it's like, I'll literally be like driving to the dispensary and see a piece of wood like on the street, so I'll stop and like throw it in my trunk or something. Like today at work, I took a piece of cardboard because I was like, oh, this could be cool, like, or whatever. And
you're
so
like, what are you doing, Rakeem? This is a good cardboard. I'm taking it home.
Oh yeah, like if I could dumpster dive, I would do it, because it's like I love, like, even I actually gather materials for pieces. I don't even know what I'm gonna do with them yet. Like I have all of these like blue pool noodles like in my studio that I don't know what's gonna happen with them yet, but I know I want to use them. So it's just kind of like gathering things like that, and yeah, not really expecting like the type of work that you have to make, but just knowing that like, okay, if I continue, things will progress. And I think that that's fine for where I'm at right now.
Cool. I would say that, you know, there's such contrast between your two practices and the way the work comes out, stuff like that, but the thing that I feel like is so similar between them in the end is some of the end result is there is, you know, that vulnerability that's in them is very, you know, it hits you very emotionally. And so it's really great to see them side by side and in their contrast. But then the same sort of in the end, there's the same, like almost that sort of like light wave vibration that hits you. So it's been amazing to have you guys here. I think I'm going to do the wrap up part where the art moderator asked what's going on for you guys next each. So what's up?
Just like in
after this, what's that? Well, you could get into what you're going to do tomorrow for fun, but I meant more the art stuff. Cause I think Clifford, you still have a show coming up.
Oh yeah. I'm like, which part?
I was like, maybe he doesn't have a show anymore. Maybe I'll just keep my mouth shut.
No, I had everything framed, or everything's going to be framed first week of September for like hopefully an October 1st opening, whatever an opening is nowadays. But yeah, it's gonna be
all bets are off these days. Sometimes a little bit. Things will happen. Yeah.
Right. But yeah, I'm excited for that. It'll be.
And that's in Hollywood?
Yeah, it's at this gallery called the Gallery At, which is kind of creating it's like the at sign, the Gallery At sign. It's in Hollywood. Yeah, I'm excited. It'll be my really good friend Mandy is gonna write for it, so I'm excited because she's amazing.
I look forward to seeing what she says.
Very nice. I don't know if I can talk about it, but
I've heard you say that in interviews before. I don't know if I can talk about this. You don't have to. All right, we'll wrap it up.
No.
I'm kidding.
It's just more like it hasn't been announced yet, so I don't want to like prematurely do it. So I'll be having a show at Ochi Projects.
We figured you would be eventually, so.
Yes, it'll be an online show of some recent like photo. It'll be work that I have not showed anyone yet for the most part. And that will be like next month.
Coming up.
There's a gallery called Superposition Gallery, which is a nomadic gallery owned by a Black woman named Storm Asher, and I'm really excited to work with her. So I did a show with her a year or so ago. Oh, what was that? All the lights came on. I did a show with her a year or so ago, and they're doing a 2-year anniversary show. So everyone that's like shown with them before is showing the piece. So I'll be showing something in that.
Nice.
Excellent. So,
I love the fall.
We all deserve and could use a beautiful fall coming up. So hopefully.
And winter.
Yeah. So, guys, it's been amazing to chat with you guys. It was like really, really nice. So we have a show that's up for another 10 days or maybe, from the time I post this, maybe on Wednesday after I throw in a couple of visuals to illustrate our chat. So you people at home who watch it, it'll come make an appointment or see it online. So
I'm gonna make an appointment to go see it again. I haven't been since I installed.
Well, please
see it.
My boo.
Please come by. I can make coffees or just stay distanced.
Do you have an espresso machine? Do you have an espresso machine?
I don't have an espresso machine, but I make pour-overs for anybody who comes to the gallery and wants one. So.
Okay, I love pour-over. Okay, I'll email you.
I'm on it.
Wait, so when's the last day?
The last day is and so this is so Saturday the 5th is the last day. Also on that day is there's going to be a parking lot exhibition. You know when you look out the window in the first parking lot you see, there's something called headlights. And Rakeem, Monta Vista is participating. Do you know about it yet? Or have you not been paying enough attention? Anyway, but so there's going to be like a parking lot exhibition. So there's going to be a whole bunch of art. Deborah Brose is doing an installation for Track 16 down there.
Ooh,
Speaking of picking stuff up off the side of the road. And so anyway, there'll be a whole bunch of stuff. So when it gets dark though, the people will be, when they're down in the parking lot, they'll be able to see the film.
Oh. Is it playing right now?
Yeah, it's playing right now.
I'm going to go drive by and see it because I'm actually right by the Bendix building.
Yeah. So anyway, so that'll be going on. So that day, people will be able to come see that show at the end of the day and then walk across the street and see that installation the same day.
You're saying the 5th is a good day.
Yeah, if you came at the end of the day, you could sort of maybe transition from seeing the show towards the end and then walk across the street to see the installation across the street.
I'll write that down. The 5th. Okay, that's September 5th. Wow.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay.
It's already
folks at home, we're figuring out the 5th. Cool.
Awesome.
Good to see y'all's faces.
Well, yeah. Good to see you guys. All right. And Rakeem, will you be in before the show ends too?
Yeah, I'll probably be in the next 3 days.
Cool.
The next 3 days. Okay.
I'm
Well, let me know if you're
working from home. So.
Oh, right. Okay. Well, let's let's all catch up. I'll text y'all. I want to. Okay.
Okay. Sounds
All right, this has been awesome.
All right.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
All right.
Bye.